Commander! His face black, his eyes red!
Darmok! The river Darmok! In winter!
Darmok.
And Jalad at Tanagra.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Fully Functional, a TNG podcast. I'm Maggie, joined by Jeff and Dory.
Yo.
Jeff and I are veteran Trekkies, and Dory is a rookie Trekkie, and we are taking her on her first journey through Star Trek The Next Generation. Today we're discussing the Season 5 episode Darmok, original air date September 28th, 1991, and as always we'll take it to Dory for the recap.
Okay, Enterprise is en route to the uninhabited El Adrel system.
El Adrel? Wow, you mispronounced it. It doesn't actually matter.
Oh no, I mispronounced something. I've never done that before. So there's a race called the Children of Tama, which I wrote sounds like a cult.
Yeah.
But the very different direction though. So we get to see Picard in his called sport mode because he has a little jacket on and he's got a little turtleneck.
This is his new outfit that you get to see every now and then.
Oh, I liked it.
Yeah,
I
his
like
little
the sport mode.
velvet jacket with the padded shoulders.
Yeah, I don't like the padded shoulders much, but I like the rest of it. And it only really comes out when he's going to do an away team thing. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. The sport mode makes sense then.
Yeah,
Yep.
right? Okay, so the Temerians basically, like, they've been sending out, like, a signal towards, like, Federation space, but, like, they speak a language that, like, up until this point, the Federation has not been able to understand. They've called it incomprehensible, which I feel like after watching this episode, people just didn't want to put in the effort, or
Yeah.
they didn't feel like getting a linguist over there.
So to be fair, like, our understanding of language is a bit different now with the advent of the internet, because this was pre-internet. But the language is very much a situation where where they needed to create something that seemed visibly alien for, the average person watching it. And I mean, an entire language where you're just communicating through metaphor, it would seem pretty alien in 1991.
Oh, no, I meant it in the sense that the Enterprise crew was able to figure it out.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
they are.
Pretty, like, not that, it wasn't that difficult. So I feel like they didn't try the other times.
Yeah, they basically just, like, fucking, like, Googled what they were talking about.
Yeah, I feel like the other 7 times in 100 years that they came in contact with these guys, that maybe a little more effort could have been put in, because the Enterprise crew was able to sort of figure some shit out fairly easily.
I did have a mild issue with the fact that as soon as they said it's incomprehensible, they cut to the next scene, and it is basically immediately everyone on the bridge staring at them while they don't understand what the Temerians are saying. And I'm just like, okay, guys, you didn't have to go for a comedy cut.
They're also speaking English, but just in a different, like, order. I used to say that, so I'm like, maybe not that incomprehensible. I think people didn't really weren't that interested in actually, connecting with them, because this was not incomprehensible.
Yeah.
But
I think you're right. Like, if there was one linguist there at all, they would have recognized the pattern, I think.
yeah, so, like, to me, this just was like everybody was kind of lazy up until, like, the Enterprise showed up. And they don't even have a linguist. They just had a computer where they could ask questions. And yeah, anyways. Okay. So yeah, Picard is very much just like, so they do, like, on video chat with them, and yeah, the bridge crew is just like, what? But they're speaking it in, like, phrases, but, like, it's English, just kind of in different order. But Picard's like, okay, we can't understand them. They probably can't understand us, but what if I use really big words to describe the situation?
Yeah.
And then, like, Picard, they laugh at Picard, I did find it interesting that like it was just like it's a purely one-sided of like Picard trying to understand what like the Enterprise crew trying to understand what they're saying, and they weren't interested in like, I mean, they were trying to communicate, but anyways, never mind. So then their captain, who I didn't learn until the very end, his name was Captain Dathan. And this guy's immediately going to be on my favorite one episode character list for our season 5 retrospective.
He shows up. He shows up one other time in Star Trek, where coincidentally he again exists to die to protect a white person, which is something that he made a comment on, specifically in regards to his previous thing. But when he showed up here, it's basically the same thing.
He's so good.
Yeah,
this actor's incredible.
Yes, he is. He is absolutely fantastic. His name is
Paul Winfield. I looked it up. I'm not going to watch this and not IMDb this man after he did such incredible work. I've got his highlights of his resume here.
Yeah,
he's in Magic School Bus.
He is also
Batman
a supporting.
Beyond.
He is a supporting character in Wrath of Khan, which is again where he died to save Kirk, and here he got to die to save Picard. And I'm just like, you know what? That's a pretty good resume right there already.
Oh, yeah, no, this guy, he was incredible. I did also, from reading his IMDb page, he also bred pugs.
Yes, he was also very left leaning, very much into black rights in the film industry and whatnot. Big union guy. This guy was like social justice to a T, and it's super cool that he got gigs like this in Star Trek, where it was basically about bridging understanding for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was amazing.
Yep.
Like, truly, I think if a different actor played this role, it wouldn't have hit as hard, but the like facial expressions and just like the little gestures, oh, he was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're trying to communicate. The captain, Dathan, he says the river Tamar in winter, and everybody's super confused. But then the Tamarians and transport
I love that
Dathan
line.
and Picard to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote, good thing Picard is in his sport mode. Then Dathan puts his hands up in like a Y, and he's like we're here. Oh, so then on the Enterprise, they can't reach Picard for science and space reasons.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you what the things for this. There's so much stuff I just over my head. I was like, I don't care. It's not.
they put up some sort of science field so they can't get through. Yeah.
So Riker is now captain, and he's like, what do you think is happening? And Worf's like, I think it's a contest.
Mm-hmm.
Worf thinks it's a contest that'll like they have to fight to the death.
Yeah, Worf exists to always present the most violent option.
Yeah.
I mean, in his defense, the way that this beam down started was by the Tamarian captain holding up a knife.
Yeah,
And is just like saying something to them, and suddenly they're both beamed down to the planet.
yeah. It's not a ridiculous like assumption to make. It's just that is Worf's role.
Yeah. It's not as ridiculous as the Borg have neither honor nor courage. That is our greatest advantage.
Yeah.
Okay, so then like down on the planet, Dathan and Picard are, they're there. Then Dathan throws a knife at Picard, and Picard then like picks it up and then like throws it back on the floor.
Yeah.
I found that really funny. So then Dathan picks it back up and goes, when the walls fell, and walks away.
Actually, it says Shaka when the walls fell.
Oh, whatever. And he's like shaking his head and like, oh, this didn't go well. And I wrote, don't they have the universal translator on this? This is too obscure. That was answered later.
Yeah.
This is too obscure for the universal translator. Sort of.
Well, yeah, because the
to
universal
a point.
translator is what's making it English for them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't translate the structure of their language.
Yeah. So then Riker's like, Worf, you're going to go down to the planet. And so he's goes to take a shuttle. So it's now nighttime on the planet, and Picard's trying to make fire. Dathan's got a whole campfire going. He's happy. He's chilling. Picard is struggling. He makes like a little bit of fire. He tries to put stuff on top of his fire. It goes out. So Picard's just like, well, I guess I'll just die. I'll just freeze to death.
Yeah.
So then
He doesn't
Dathan,
try
then
again or anything.
Yeah, I was like, Picard, you've still got all the same shit. Just like give it another go. It's not like you don't have the time.
I mean, the implication is that he's been trying for a while, which is why it's dark and he's still failed.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so then Dathan, then he like takes some stuff off his vest, and then he puts them on the ground and he touches them, and like puts his hand to like his head, and then he puts the stuff on like different rocks around the fire.
Well, I think the implication is he's doing like some sort of prayer, some sort of ritual or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no, for sure. I just thought that was like really interesting sort of setup. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right after I wrote like religious question mark. So yeah, Picard is just like pacing in the cold/dark, and then Dathan throws fire at Picard, like a stick on fire, whatever, at him, and goes, Temba, his arms wide. And then Picard kind of interprets that to mean like give or take. I mean, in this like I think I think it's give. But I couldn't help but thinking like when he throws the fire, I'm like, how did a wildfire not fucking start? He just threw a chunk of fire onto like grass and nothing happened.
Maybe the grass was wet.
I mean, that's a reach, I think. But listen.
I mean, fire isn't that automatic.
No,
like,
it really isn't.
The grass that it was on probably wasn't on fire long enough to like set the rest of the stuff around it to be on fire. Because like that sort of like dry desert grass like burns up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I'm no fire expert.
We know,
but
that's why we're correcting you about fire.
Okay, so Worf and a lady are in a shuttle. They're trying to get down to Picard, but then the Temerians like shoot at the shuttle. But the damage is like minimal. It's enough so like they can't go down to the planet, but they can like go back to the ship. Mm-hmm. And Riker just like can't help but be like a little impressed, and he goes, "Nice shooting."
Yeah, it's a pretty standard tactic. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we get our first team meeting, which I love. We get multiple team meetings in this episode. Mm-hmm. So Geordi's like, yeah, I can probably like beam Picard up in like another way, but I'll need like a day. And Troy's like, he'll be dead by then. I'm like, oh my God, Troy. Oh boy.
Maybe chill a bit.
Yeah. So Worf disagrees because he has confidence in Picard's ability as a warrior. Worf also thinks they should attack the Temerians. But Riker's like, he's getting pretty frustrated. This is not a good time for him. But Data and Troy are like going to go research together. So, love that team up. So then the next morning, Picard then investigates Dathan's camp and just sort of looks at his shit. And then Data and Troy watch the footage from the video chat from the day before. So thanks, AV team, for that. And the term Darmok stands out to them. And then they ask the computer, and the computer's like, there's 47 entries. And then Troy goes, all our technology and experience, our universal translator, our years in space, contact with more alien cultures than I can even remember. And then Data goes, I've encountered 1,754 non-human races during my tenure in Starfleet.
Cool, thanks, Data.
And then Troy goes, and we still can't even say hello to these people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they have the computer search for Tanagra, and an entry is related to Chantil 3, which is like a bit of we'll just say a flag. It's just like a flag that, because when they did the Darmok search, also had an entry related to Chantil 3. So they're like, oh, okay. So Tanagra is an island continent on Chantil 3, and Darmok is the name of a mytho-historical hunter on Chantil 3. So, okay.
Because it kept saying, like, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
Yeah. So then back on the planet, Dathan gives Picard a knife, and then they hear, like, roaring in the distance. And I wrote, like, does he think that, like, Picard is Darmok and he is Jalad? And, like, is Tanagra on this planet? Is this where they are? And then, like, rocks start falling down. So Picard's, yeah, give me the fucking knife. So, okay, back on the ship, Riker calls Geordi and is like, I want Picard out of there now. Oh, and then there's, like, a new person. There's a lady there, and she gives, her name is Leffler, we learn. She gives, like, this look to Geordi, like, oh, are you serious? Like, it's not gonna fucking happen. Mm-hmm. Like, this is not gonna get done right this minute.
Did you recognize her?
Was I supposed to?
That was Ashley Judd.
That was Ashley Judd?
Yep.
What? I did not recognize her in the slightest.
That's fine. It was about 10 years before she was recognizable to anyone.
Oh my god. Okay, well, yeah, I did not notice that. She gets a few lines, so good for her. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, so Riker's like, I want Picard out now. And then Geordi's like, lol, yeah, that's not going to happen. And then they start kind of fighting something, which I wrote, is that the fucking Predator? Is that Predator? Are they fucking Predator? Is this why you guys made me watch this movie to prepare me for this episode? Because they were fighting Predator. It's Predator. Like, I don't know how any other way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't make you watch it in prep for this episode, but yeah, that is
just a coincidence.
Yeah,
because I don't think I would have known what to call this if we haven't watched Predator. Oh god, I guess Picard is the Arnold Schwarzenegger of this. I mean, he's the only one who makes it out. Oh, but a lot less violent than Predator.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Oh no, there goes my pen. Okay, so yeah, it's basically like an invisible shape in the bushes, but we can still kind of see it, like Predator. I just wrote, Picard sounds Scottish for a second. Okay, so Picard deduces that, like, they're talking by, I don't know, I think the Predator leaves, whatever, I don't care. He deduces that they talk by metaphors or, like, examples. So, but I also then did write, why did Predator look like it had a Triceratops head? I don't know. We don't really get a good look of Predator, but, like, we get little flashes, and that's sort of what it looked like to me.
You know, I give them credit for trying to do whatever they were trying to do with the effects for this alien thing, because in the HD version that we watched, God, it looks so much better than it used to. It legitimately looked like a terrible effect before. It was the one thing holding the episode back, and now it's at least passable.
Yeah, it looked fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so Picard and Dathan try stabbing Predator. Don't get a lot of success there. Picard gets a big slash on his shirt. He's fine, but his shirt gets cut. Like, it's so close to becoming a crop top.
Yeah.
It's a classic Star Trek thing, the shirt getting slashed when they're in a fight.
Yeah. So then they're able to start to, like, on the ship, on the Enterprise, doing, like, their transporting thing that Geordi was working on. Excuse me. But they can't really get a good, like, they kind of have him, but not really, like, part of him. And O'Brien is doing a question. No, I'm joking. He can only do so much. I'm joking. No, he's just like, I can only get part of him, and I get it. I'm not going to hold that against O'Brien.
Yeah.
But
I get that you have to
like,
commit to the bit, though.
But they can't really get Picard. But also Picard's yelling, no! when they're trying to get him off the planet. But then the things that they note is that the Temerians can see that, like, Dathan his, like, life signs are, like, not great. But they don't do anything. They're just sort of, like, watching and letting it happen. So, basically, do they call Starfleet to deal with Predator? Because that's basically what they wanted them there for. But yeah, they can't get a good enough signal in Picard, so he stays on the planet. So we do second team meeting, but this time with Dr. C. And then the Temerians made the field stronger, and Geordi and Worf are going to adjust a thing. I don't know. That's what I wrote. I don't.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. It's just some tech speak.
Yeah. Okay, so then Troy and Data give their report, and the Temerians basically speak in imagery. So Troy uses the example Juliet on her balcony as an image of romance, which makes sense. I get it. And so Darmok on the ocean, Picard thinks it might mean like alone or isolated, and draws a circle around a stone. The stone is Darmok. And then Dathan goes, Kayazi's children, their face is wet, in which I wrote concern. Is that what that maybe could mean? Oh yeah, because he's been like really terribly wounded by Predator. So Picard is sort of able to like identify that I mean, I was technically right. They are, I guess, on the island. They are on
yeah, they're not literally on
Tanagra,
yeah. He's just like, the implication is that Dathan, was that his name? Dathan?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Dathan was trying to recreate the scenario of the legend of Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
Yeah.
So they're metaphorically at Tanagra.
Yeah. So Picard also was like, oh, so you fucking knew that Predator was here, and they needed to like defeat it together so that both sides will unite. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And then so the captain's like, Dathan's not doing great, and he's like you tell me a story, basically, even though he can't understand it. So I just wrote, okay, well, I mean, you couldn't have picked a better person to just have someone talk and listen to.
Yeah.
Picard's got just such a nice voice to listen to. And then, okay, I thought Picard was going to go with like a Shakespeare story or like something from the 20th century, but he goes with this story about Gilgamesh.
Yeah. It's so
I did not pay attention to this story.
So
it's about like two people having to team up or something, but
Not quite.
Yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh
I don't know. One of them dies.
Yeah. It sort of like fits the theme, because the Epic of Gilgamesh is, as far as we have discovered so far, it's the oldest story written down.
Oh.
So, yeah, the Epic of we actually don't have all of it.
We have it in bits and pieces. A lot of it has been reconstructed from retellings of it that came many years later. But the retellings of it are different, obviously, because over thousands of years, how you tell a story is not exactly the same. So
then when was it from? Like how old?
It was the ancient Sumerians in Mesopotamia. So like 3,500 BC-ish.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Party.
So yeah, it's because the whole thing is that the Temerians like speak in metaphors from like their mythos, their cultural mythos. So Picard telling him the oldest story we have written down is sort of to tie into the theme of that.
Yeah, it's kind of an allegory. Also, apparently, choosing Gilgamesh was kind of an accident. The story was written long before he chose that particular reference in here, and was just like, oh, hey, this is actually kind of like Gilgamesh and Enkidu, huh? All right, well, there we go. Joe Menosky, who is the one who wrote this, who is kind of famous and infamous within Star Trek. I've mentioned he's done some real good episodes, but also some that are He turned this into a screenplay from a story written by the same guy who wrote Devil's Due, and it took him 2 years to finally get this the way that he wanted to. Apparently, Rick Berman absolutely hated the original story premise and is like, no, I'm not interested in this. And Michael Piller had Minosky workshop it. And at one point, he was really stuck. And then Michael Piller told him, hey, so I just saw Dances with Wolves. And told him the campfire moment in Dances with Wolves. And it just sparked inspiration in him.
That's nice. Okay, so then, like, Dathan, good guy to the end, waits till the end of Picard's story to die. So rip to him. So then the Enterprise shoots at the Temerian ship, so it, like, lowers its shield so they can bring back Picard. The Temerians start shooting at the Enterprise, and Riker's like, they get Picard. Riker's like, we gotta go, but there's damage. And then, like, yeah, they're shooting them. Everybody does the, like, whoa, shaking everything. Shields are down. And then they hail the other ship because... Oh, and then that other guy answers with the same phrase that Dathan did on the planet. His face black, his eyes red. Which,
probably means, like, angry or pissed off or whatever.
Yeah. Then Picard... goes onto the bridge and he just uses basically every single term that Dathan used on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much, like, actually made sense. But, like, he really just was like, okay, gotta remember everything that Dathan said.
Well, it's like, like using the few phrases of a language in order to, like, try to communicate something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, so I kind of... From, like, this, I kind of would guess, like, when the walls fell maybe means death or, like, died or something.
Yeah, it kind of means, like, a failure, like, an end, because it's, like, a tragedy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shaka, I think, is supposed to be a city, and the walls falling is the city being sieged and collapsing.
That's the thing, in this episode, we sort of purposely don't get the full answers to everything and what everything means.
Yeah. Then they say Picard and Dathan at El Adrel. And I was like, oh, cute. And then they're like, okay, with sails unfurled. And I was like, okay, that's got to be like, let's go.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then Riker says, to Picard, new friends, Captain. And Picard says, I can't say number one, but at least they're not new enemies. And so then we cut to, like, the last scene, and Picard is reading Greek. Riker's in there with him, and then he's like, oh God, what did I write? Guess who wrote in the
margins again?
Yeah, that would be me. Oh yeah, so he's reading Greek because he's, like, trying to think about, like, other language shit. And yeah, but, like, in the end they still didn't get Predator, so
well, that wasn't the point.
I mean,
it was just to, like, sort of put them in a difficult situation together so they could try to find a way to communicate. So actually,
but did they have to go there where they had to fight Predator and then Dathan had to die?
He didn't have to die, but him dying is both a poetic end to his attempts.
The thing is, like, he didn't have to die, but he was willing to. He's like, I'm gonna put us in this dangerous situation, in order, because Picard even commented at the end.
They're trauma
like,
bonding.
Yeah, basically. He's like, he's willing to die to try to facilitate communication.
It's a really interesting premise altogether. This episode has actually been used in academia quite a bit to discuss language differences and communication differences that people have. It's also been discussed in the negative by a lot of people saying, the language has absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever, and nothing like this could possibly exist. And here we are in the internet years later and using something very similar to communicate through comedy and shitposts with memes, where we communicate through reference constantly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing
I
is,
do
like,
want to mention... real quick that the episode just ends with Picard looking out the window, and he's got the knife that Dathan gave him, and he touches the knife and then to his forehead the same way that like Dathan did on the planet, which was a really nice way to honor him.
It was, but I think it was a little like, oh look, I'm doing what you did, but like, it doesn't mean anything except to the person watching, and technically he's in a room all by himself.
Well, he's doing it for himself, just
Yeah,
to
I
sort
know
of
that.
like show respect and stuff.
But it's. I think that watching the episode again, I had so little to actually say about it afterwards because it just ends up engrossing me every time I go through it. I found that like partway through, I was like, oh shit, I haven't taken any notes in like 15 minutes because I've just been watching and watching and watching.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to us watching this episode because I thought up so many examples of how we do this in English, of how we communicate through reference and stuff. Because it's like, even before the internet and even before memes, like even before like millennials communicated exclusively in Simpsons references, it's just like we do this shit all the time. Like,
Yep.
you know, like one of the examples is like if you call someone a narcissist, like that's based on the myth of Narcissus who fell in love with his own reflection.
So I actually have some personal experience in this regard, and it relates to something that Joe Manosky said. He kind of he wrote a kind of famous / infamous note to or memo to Michael Piller when he thought that he really had the episode down. A lot of his final thoughts didn't quite make it into the episode, but it came out strong either way. But at the very end, he says, "This is an episode wherein our characters are brought into contact with an alien psyche. In order to communicate, in order for communication to take place, the aliens attempt to get our characters to recognize the fluid nature of that psyche. In so doing, our characters open the way to communication, but also learn something about themselves in the process. In terms of what the viewer." Or what the average viewer might take away, too often we see communication difficulties between individuals and countries as a problem of ignorance, or even as a result of one side's madness or refusal to reason. In reality, we could be dealing with very different ways of looking at life in general. Something of this idea could come through in this episode. And I love that because I go back to when I first started talking with my girlfriend who is from Ukraine. And we had a language barrier. I didn't speak her language, and she didn't speak my language. We knew like little bits and pieces of it, but not very much, not enough to like form sentences. And when you're using something like Google Translate, which in this case would be the universal translator if we're looking for comparison, then the only the thing that you have to look out for the most is using idioms in our speech, because we use so many little phrases that are just references to other things, and they don't actually mean what they say. Like when you tell someone to take a hike, no, that's an idiom in our language.
Yeah.
It means, go away, but it's not going to translate to go away. However, we colloquially completely understand what that is, and there's no way to completely translate it without rephrasing it. And that's the whole problem that the Temerians have here.
Yeah, they're basically getting a literal translation of what they're saying.
Yep,
And
exactly.
I think, like, yeah, most of my examples were idioms. Like, if we say, like, oh, we got him on the ropes, it's like, if you don't understand what that means already, like, that doesn't mean anything to you. Like, what the fuck does that mean? But if you understand, it's like, oh, in boxing, like, if you're about to win, usually the guy's, like, up against the barrier ropes and stuff.
Yep.
So you're like,
It's
oh,
a witch hunt, Maggie. There's another one.
Sorry?
It's a witch hunt. There's another one.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, there's so many things that are self-referential too, like in the way we name stuff. Like all the planets are like Greek and Roman gods. Like I said, some like sort of psychological things are named after Greek and Roman stuff. Lots of Greek and Roman shit in our language.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Like, there's a famous example of, like, Thursday was originally Thor's day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, named after Thor, and, like, there's tons of shit like that in our language. That's just, like, a reference to other things.
Speaking of first communications, actually, there's something that I didn't see mentioned in any of the writings that I was looking up on this episode, but it's interesting how often gifts are what facilitate the first communication between different cultures. Even if we're going back to like colonialism and shit like that, like as many problems as there are with that, the first communications would be quite literally giving people gifts, and then trying to use that to explain what it was they were doing. And in this case, we have the same situation with Dathan giving Picard the stick of fire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're so right, because a lot of languages, like, it's about, like, not about, but you see that, like, people will literally think about the world in different ways, like have a completely view on the world based on the language they speak in, and especially the language they think in. Like, there's tons of examples of certain cultures not perceiving certain colors, because their language does not have words for them.
Yes.
Like,
yes. I think it's in Chinese, the color, like Mandarin and whatnot. The color brown doesn't have a name. It's like yellowish red, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's certain, I don't remember the languages specifically, but there's certain languages that have like completely different words for, like, blue and light blue and stuff. Like, it's light blue is considered like a completely different color to regular blue. And in English we have this because we have red and pink.
Yes.
In other languages,
that's
just
another shade of red.
Yeah, that's just light red. You know, but to us, pink is a completely different color to red, right? It's related to it, but
there was a lot of the superiority of white man bullshit intellectualism that came out of the 1800s that was looking back on a lot of literature from the Greek and Roman cultures. And what they kind of thought for a really long time was that humans had suddenly evolved to be able to see colors like blue because, quite famously, Homer's Iliad describes the ocean as wine dark, and they couldn't decide if that was a reference to like every word being a poem, because I mean that's a poem, or if it's actually just they couldn't see that color. And it turns out no, blue doesn't really come up that often in nature, so it makes sense to not really have a word for it.
Yeah. I think, like, I saw a video once about how the language of color, like, develops, and there's a pretty consistent pattern that the words for light and dark usually come up first, and then the first color that usually develops a word is, like, red.
Yes.
And then I don't remember the rest of the pattern, but that's essentially, it goes like light, dark, red.
Okay, that makes sense.
Is, like, it's not universal, but it's like a pretty consistent pattern.
That makes sense. I mean, red is one of the most stark and what do you call it? And like vibrant colors that we see, and we see it rarely, but when, like, in nature, but when we do see it, it really stands out.
Yeah, it's an important color. Like, there's a reason we use it for signage and for, like, it because it represents danger. Like, a lot of poisonous berries and shit are, like, bright red. A lot of, like, dangerous things are bright red. That's sort of why that color has importance. Yeah. And I think, so I don't know if this was intentional, but Star Trek sort of came up with the concept for this episode really early on, unintentionally, possibly. In the episode where Picard has to communicate with, I believe it's, the Shellyak, like when they're trying to get
the language
to
of law.
Yeah, they have to get the people off that planet. Like Data has to go down and negotiate with them. Troy, he's having like a little meeting with Troy, and she's like, it's a wonder that, like, you know, we can communicate at all. And it's like, if like you and I were like stuck together, like, and she holds up his cup of tea, and she's like, Zismarith, what did I say? And he's like, tea. And she's like, did I? I could have meant brown, hot, liquid, anything. You know, so it's basically like she's describing the plot of this episode. Like,
fun fact: that episode and this episode share an actor.
Oh.
Yeah, the what do you call it? The first officer of the Temerian vessel. He's one of the guys down on the planet.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep. Yeah, he has a very distinct speech pattern and face, so yeah, it makes sense.
I think the actors who played the Temerians did a really good job of acting like they knew what they were saying.
The director actually felt really bad about this episode because, like, while he had a translation syllabus with him, he's like, well, how do I get them to say this and make it believable? And I mean, it's lucky he was working with absolutely fantastic actors because he did not feel confident in what was done with it at all. But hey, turned out fantastically. Also, I love the river Tamak in winter is literally shut the fuck up. I love that. But yeah, you are absolutely right in that with languages, there's this very difficult thought process that we have to get past. And I mean, as I mentioned, Joe Menosky thought of that as well when he was coming up with the episode. I believe Ronald Reagan is kind of infamously quoted as saying the Russians have no word for freedom, which is incidentally not true. But that is an example of,
well, you know, the problem with the
othering.
French is they have no word for entrepreneur.
but like that is an example of in that his case, he's using a language difference to other a culture, whereas that's the kind of thing that should bring people together better as they try to understand each other. But you know, Reagan.
Yeah. Was he saying that literally, or was that just like a sort of like what do you call?
What was it? Some like uber patriotic thing? I couldn't tell you. I never actually saw like where the original quote was stated, like what the context of it was. I just kind of know the quote, and I mean it isn't true. He could have meant it as a as some like American patriotism thing. Yeah, but he also could have meant it literally. Who knows? I mean, there were so many people within the American government that were completely like self-centered in English Western thought and English Western communication that it absolutely would make sense to me if he believed it. Yeah. But who knows? Yeah.
I think that's like that quote that you read earlier is that like, yeah, a lot of like communication differences is in that we just like perceive things we conceptualize things differently. And it's like you gotta see where the other person's coming from. I love this episode because I think it sort of exemplifies what Star Trek is, what Star Trek could be, like sort of the mission of Star Trek is. It's like discovery and understanding,
Patrick Stewart actually cited this episode for those very same reasons at Gene Roddenberry's funeral later this year, or later the year that this was shot.
Yeah. This episode is everything that, like, I think the ideals of Star Trek, like, try to be. It's like, it's just two people trying to understand each other, trying to understand a new culture, and, like, connection, So that's why it's sort of one of my favorites. And also, I just like sort of the... I like when they have to figure something out. So I like the process of them figuring out, like, what... like, how they're communicating.
Dory, the nerds have been talking. What do you think?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have, like, a super strong opinion on this episode.
That's fair.
I do think... I don't know.
Do you think it was effective in what it was trying to do?
Yes. I do think it was an interesting way to go of, like, how they used, like, the imagery and, like, I guess, yeah, as you guys said, like, now we use it really frequently, but, like, then in the 90s, I imagine this wasn't as common.
That's right.
Because it's more meme culture now, but, I liked, I guess, Picard figured out, I think, like, one thing I'm, like, a little hung up on, and it's so unbelievably minor, is, like, when Data and Troy are talking to the computer to try to, like, figure out the words, like, I feel like they could have just, like, in one step just been like, hey, computer, do any of these words have anything in common in terms of history versus asking individually? Because I feel like that would have saved, like, a little bit of time, just
so
because,
Dory,
yeah,
the requirements of the episode are that the crew on the ship is a little incompetent, I would say.
Yeah.
So that Picard can make his dramatic re-entrance at the end. It is very much out of character how slowly they figure this out on the ship.
Because I would have thought,
yeah,
like, even,
and...
like, Data would have been like, hey, computer, what are these words? Do they
Yeah.
have it? Like, I feel like they would have been
exactly. You're right.
way more simple, but, like, why would they
Yeah.
analyze it one word at a time
And
instead of, like, all the words in the sentence?
Yeah. And also, they, like... The implication is almost that, like, as soon as they find out that those two words have a common, like, link, they stop. Because
Yes.
they don't seem to have investigated any other words or looked into because the computer says, like, Darmok is a mytho-historical hunter on Chantil 3. So, like, hey, computer, what is the legend of Darmok? Like,
Where is Chantil 3? Like,
Where-
what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
yeah.
Because, like, it's not like they're even there, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not where this is, like, it truly, what they discovered has nothing to do with anything in a way, other than they just found a common,
Well,
like,
they figure
thing.
they figure out that they're speaking in, like, references, but they don't investigate to try to figure out what the reference is, which is weird to me.
Yeah, they just are like, well, this is in this situation, this is an island, and this is a guy, and yeah, I think we can call it there.
Yeah, it's like it would take one extra step of being like, hey, computer, do you have any more info on this guy? Like,
Yeah.
like using their own example. It's like if they like Juliet on our balcony. It's like, hey, computer, do you have any info about, like, Juliet? What was her deal? And it's like,
Yeah.
Juliet was a figure from this, like, romantic play, and it's like, oh, maybe it has something to do with romance. Like, what's the deal with the balcony? Like, there's a scene where Romeo comes up to woo her or whatever the fuck,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of another example too. Sorry. It's like, if we're talking and someone's, like, being a boomer or whatever, even that in and of itself, it's like you have to know what being a boomer means.
Yeah.
That's true. Yep.
And you're talking about this conversation, talking with this boomer, and you're just like, it was very old man yells at cloud. And if you don't know what that is referencing, that is incomprehensible to you. Like, what the fuck does that mean? What does an old man yelling at a cloud have to do with anything? And you have to sort of understand that it's a Simpsons reference and like what the context is of that scene and blah blah blah. So it's like the sort of examples was like me having an argument in my head of the people who are like, it's incomprehensible that like a species would communicate that way, and it's like, we fucking do it though.
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah, I think right before we started recording, my roommate was watching the episode, and she showed me a couple of like memes about this episode.
Yeah,
that was like picture of Dathan, and it was like like couple walking down street. Man looks distracted. Woman is upset.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, I know exactly what that means.
Yep.
Like, yep.
Like man points to butterfly.
Yeah. Or like, yeah, it's like, yep. Like man with math.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that was pretty interesting. I also what I liked with this episode, it was very bridge crew, like everybody was working together on like one, like it was one storyline, but everybody had like their own things to do that was related to this. Like you had like Jordy working on his shit in engineering, you had Troy and Data doing their research, and like everything came back to like the main overarching story, which I really liked. So love it when the bridge crew works together, and we got 2 team scenes, which I loved. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have like a ton to say about this episode. I like liked it, but I don't know.
It didn't really stand out or anything to you?
Yeah. I mean, like, I liked it. I definitely see how, like, it would be a significant episode. But, yeah, it didn't, I guess it didn't, like, hit me as hard as a lot of, it does a lot of people. I liked it. I liked it.
That's totally fair.
It just...
We've crossed a meme threshold, though, because there's so many memes based on this episode.
Oh my god, is there ever?
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing them because I love a meme.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting. So then, like, here's another question then. Like, going forward, what do they put in, like, how does this contribute to, like, say, somebody else meeting the Temerians in the future? Like...
Oh, you're funny.
I guess... No, I'm saying, like, theoretically. I know we're probably not going to see it. But I'm just thinking, like, I guess Picard does his, like, captain's log. But, like, how would they make sure that people know that they speak in, like, imagery and, like...
Well, I imagine he sends a report to Starfleet. And then they inform people of, like word gets around, basically.
The hot goss.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine they'd send...
Yeah, from the Federation Gossip Network.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I'd love that.
Yeah. It's like
a website.
they sort of send, like, occasional reports and stuff, like, to people. It's like, here's the newsletter, you know, of, like, the shit you have to know now. So I imagine it goes out in, like, the next Starfleet newsletter.
Starfleet newsletter. Oh my god.
Not literally, but like their daily
I would
reports
love that,
or whatever.
though.
Yeah.
Can you imagine though there is a Starfleet newsletter? Oh my god, I would love that so much. Oh my god. The latest news in the galaxy. This happened in the quadrant this, and happy birthday to Captain whoever on this ship. Oh God, that would honestly be amazing.
There's a bake sale on Narendra 4.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, come to this day on this day at the at this star base, and we'll upgrade this thing and throw into this thing. Like, oh my God. This is another one of my like now new
Things, the Starfleet newsletter.
Yeah, God, I love that.
All right. I suppose we should move on then, unless anyone has something else they want to bring up.
No, I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, no,
so,
I'm good.
favorite lines and moments.
Captain Dathan, he was amazing. Like this Paul Winfield was amazing. There's just like such like subtle like facial expressions and stuff, and he just was so good. I think he sold this so well, because I think you really have to commit to this, because the lines definitely don't sound natural,
Right.
and but it sounded natural when he was saying them.
Yeah.
Because like if somebody else sang them, like it could sound like questionable, but it I did like when the Temerian ship shoots at like Worf and the shuttle, but the damage is minimal, and then Riker's like, nice shooting. I liked when Riker was like, Geordi, I want Picard out of there now, and then the lady who is Ashley Judd apparently gives like Geordi the look like, oh, absolutely fucking not, that's not gonna happen. I'm like, oh, I like when Dathan gave Picard fire. And also when Picard threw the knife back at him.
Yeah.
I think just honestly the actor really just kind of
Yeah.
pulled it all together for me.
I think, like I mentioned before, him especially did a really good job of sounding like he knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
Because it didn't... you can tell sometimes when someone, like, especially if it's in a foreign language, like, you can tell when someone's just saying words, but, like, doesn't really understand what they're saying. This
Yes,
sounded
very
like
much
he
so.
understood what he was saying. Like, he is genuinely speaking this as a language himself.
Yeah,
So I
'cause,
thought
like
that
at
was
the
really good.
end when Picard is back on the Enterprise and he's just saying all this stuff that Dathan said, like to me it just sounded like he was like, okay, what did Dathan say on the planet, and just like
Yeah.
repeating it all. It did not for 1 second make me think that Picard actually knew what the fuck he was saying.
Yeah.
So sorry,
that's
Patrick
okay.
Stewart, but
Yeah.
but I mean that might have also been like the acting choice that he's
Yeah.
not really supposed to, but
Yeah. It's hard to pick because this episode doesn't really have like moments, I don't think. It's just like generally overall, like I really like the episode. Oh, you know what? I like the moment where Picard like finally figures out what's going on, where the guy's saying like an army with fists open and then an army with fists closed, trying to communicate that like we should spread out and then try to lure the creature, try to lure Predator like between us. So I thought that was really good, like where the communication finally like sort of gets somewhere between them. I thought that was really well done. And which I wanted to bring up this example too. There's a great movie called the 13th Warrior, and the movie sort of centers around this guy who's on this mission with a bunch of other dudes, and he doesn't speak their language. But like hanging out with them, he sort of gets to learn it. And there's a really well shot scene where they're around a campfire, and he starts understanding what they're saying, and it kind of goes like slowly, like the actors like switch to English and they throw in English words like here and there to sort of show the audience like how he's picking it up. So I always find things like that really interesting. A favorite line, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. Because that just sort of becomes a meme within the Star Trek fandom.
Very
And
much so.
we keep telling you about this song that was created from lines from Picard. And that line is sort of the base of that song. Like, it starts off with Picard saying that over and over, and it kind of like is just repeated throughout the whole song. So it just sticks in my mind.
The River Tamok in winter.
It's basically like, stop.
Just it's the way that he says it the first time is essentially saying "shut the fuck up," and I love that because like the way that the two actors carry their performance in that, because the first officer is mouthing off and Paul Winfield's what's he fucking called? Dathan. Just like he holds his hand up and doesn't even look at him, and it is just like talk to the hand. God, I love that moment.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's my story.
All right. If that's it, we'll move on to predictions for the next episode. So the next episode is called Ensign Rowe. So we meet a new crew member. And I will I'll read the Netflix description because I couldn't really think of anything for this episode. New officer Ensign Rowe is enlisted to track down a band of Bajoran terrorists. Yet Rowe, a Bajoran herself, must first win her crewmates' trust.
Oh, boy. Now, was this someone who's, like, actually going to stay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
They're not, like, a super main character, but they are around.
Okay, so I think she's brought in to find terrorists.
Wow.
I know, what a reach.
Wow.
So she's looking for Bajoran terrorists, and she is a Bajoran, too.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think that plays out?
God, I feel like it's going to end up with them, like... Okay, so I think she'll probably, like, use whatever resources, like, going to, you know, people she knows maybe at the planet to try to figure out who this... to, like, get these terrorists, and maybe they catch up with them and they pull that bullshit thing of, like, oh, you're one of us, you're gonna turn us in. Which I fucking hate, where it's like, you do not need to be exclusively, like, you know, loyal to a group that's you're technically part of just because you're part of that group. People can be individual and do shitty things. Mm-hmm. But I think that there will be, like, maybe some tension on the ship of the same bullshit of, like, oh, is this the best person to be doing this? What if, like, it's the questioning of, like, loyalty, which I don't like, but I can't think of anything else to put to predict at the moment.
What do you think the terrorists want?
Power? Yeah, I'll go with power. I don't know.
All right.
I'm tired. I don't feel like being super creative today.
Okay. Well, if you want to see if Dory is correct, watch along with us and join us for the next episode of Fully Functional, a TNG podcast.
Goodbye.